Hey everybody, and welcome to Elements of 40K Air Element Edition. In the previous two, we've talked about a more in-depth look at the fire and earth elements, and this time it's air. Again, if you're not sure what I'm talking about, check out my Elements of 40K video, as well as 2020's response, which should be a video response to my video as well. So, because they're both really good, and I think that'll help you get an understanding for this more in-depth look at them. So we're talking about air. The air element armies are typically fast-moving, maneuverable armies with the addition of 5th Ed's outflank rule, outflanking as well, with either scout or infiltrate, which they can also use to not outflank to help their maneuverability or speed advantage. I know some of you may be thinking right now, okay, so mechanized lists, and my answer to that is really no. While mechanized lists will give you army air tendencies temporarily, because the ability to move 12 inches or more depending on your transport, it's not really going to turn your guard army, for example, or your Tau army into a true air army. It's going to help you maneuver more, and that's always good, and higher survivability rate against small arms fire. But it's not a true air army. It's not an army that's all around maneuverable or fast in general. So it has air tendencies. Air armies include pretty much almost any Dark Eldar army. Part, in fact, because of its transports, but also because of its fleet. Some Eldar armies, including Eldar jet bike armies, any Space Marine bike army, Raven Wing, stuff like that. The air type unit entries would be stuff like transports, Valkyries, Vendettas, things you can assault out of it, either as a transport, or open top transports, especially in assault vehicles like Land Raiders, even bikes, things that can move 12 inches. To a lesser extent, cavalry and beasts, because they're a 12-inch charging fleet. And another unit that's really good for this is battle suits and stealth suits of Tau. You can move, shoot, and then move again, so you can get into good fire position with fire and then not leave yourself exposed and jump back, or jump forward but into cover, or behind cover. So that's the armies and units in general. One thing about facing this army, it's not like facing an earth or fire army, because when you face an earth or fire army, you have an idea of what your opponent's going to do or what your opponent's strategy is. With air, when you're facing down an air army, aside from the fact they're going to be able to move fast and contest or get places quickly, unless they're like a witch army of Dark Eldar, you're not really going to know if they're going to go for the close combat attacks. Even Space Marine biker armies are better off in shooting than they are in the assault, only because of their numbers, and assaulting the cover on bikes is dangerous. But you get the idea. You can have less of a straightforward understanding of what the opponent will do to you than you do with earth or fire. And the same thing goes for water. We'll talk about in this own video. That's not to say you won't have any ideas. You can see what the equipment they got, what they're being led by, who has the dangerous weapons in the squads and whatnot, and you get a feel for it. But it's not going to be as straightforward as earth or fire. Air and water tend to be less straightforward armies. When you're playing as air, there's a few things you have to keep in mind, and one of which is your speed. Yes, you can cover areas very quickly. The stereotypical biker armies and jet bike armies, which are air, can cover great ground. Anything that's fast, Skimmer can cover great ground because of turn boosting. But don't do it just because you can. You have to be careful, you gotta be smart. There's a all too often easy mistake and blunder to make, and that is to overextend yourself. Get too far too fast. And this is bad because now you'll get into the line of your opponent's guns, especially if they haven't been able to if it's your first turn, you turn boost and you're halfway across the board already. Well, now your opponent doesn't have to move much stuff. And what I mean is, a strength of this armor when you play it is to force your opponent to react, to move. So, go radically towards the flank. When he's positioning his stuff, then you can shoot over towards the middle or towards the other flank. and then he will have position stuff for nothing, essentially. And this is hard to pull off, but you get the idea and the gist of it. Remember, because you move fast with bikes and stuff like that, you also fall back fast. So, unless you're Raven Wing, which are fearless, you have to worry about stuff like that. Air armies tend to be a little tougher to wound than traditional infantry, either because they're in the bikes giving good toughness, or because they're in some sort of transport. Yeah, some sort of transport. But once they start taking hits, they go down. They're like glass cannons. They can be devastating, but if they start getting hit by things that you weren't prepared to get hit by or didn't think would hit you, you got a problem. Knowing ranges without having to measure is key for an air army. It's all about distance and maneuverability. On the deployment aspect, it's less critical to be deployed perfectly. I mean, obviously you want to deploy as best you can, but if you made a blunder, if your opponent did something radical on his first turn and it's your turn, you can easily adapt to it better than other armies. You can also cross the board quickly to get objectives or get to your opponent's deployment zone for his objective. And annihilation missions are faster, so you can apply lots of pressure in one area, destroy things piece by piece, and redeploy. When you find against there, you have to remember this. When it comes to objectives, it's hard to hold objectives against an air army because they can zip forward, shoot things up, continue doing that, and then like at the end of 5th turn, or on their last turn for the game could theoretically end, they can then turbo boost or move fast, or do whatever they need to do to get in range to claim or contest certain objectives. So you have to be careful. One thing you want to do when facing an air army, when you're playing against an army, is play for the objective. You should do that in any game. Always play for the objective. Because you can get caught up in trying to chase the air army. And if you get caught up in chasing them down and taking them apart because, they're becoming like a wasp or a gnat and picking at you, picking at your army, and then you take the bait and stop moving, you may have moved things off objectives, or you may leave objectives critically undefended with like a few guys there. So you have to be careful with that. Also, when you're playing with air, again, I said this before, and it's important to state, don't overextend yourself. Because as an air army, what your opponent wants for you to do is to make a mistake. You're going to make mistakes in any army almost all the time, unless you've been playing it and got it down to a science. But by making a mistake, I mean, falter, stutter, essentially trip up, knock the wind out of your sails, so to speak, and then they can be on top of you. And air armies usually are smaller because they're more points heavy. Air and water armies can be very points heavy very easily. Earth and fire can too, but air and water typically are higher point units that you field, so you have to be careful. You don't have as many sacrificial or throwaway units as a horde army, for example. So yeah. One thing I will say with air, being in annihilation missions, if you have the ability to annihilate something, like if your units, if you're playing it right, people like to run away if they make their leadership chest and shooting and they got like 2 guys left in the squad, they'll pull them back and run away. You can chase them down a lot easier with air and take them out quickly for that kill point. That's pretty much it for air. When you're playing against air, they're going to outmaneuver you or outspeed you unless you're an air army. Air versus air armies are kind of fun to see because it's just zipping and cross everywhere. But anyway, so don't expect to outmaneuver them, but you should do things to force them a way that, don't play into their hand. They're going to move a certain way and expect you to react to it. If you do something different, you may have to force them to do something they didn't want to, which is essentially tripping them up temporarily. It's not as much as a good full-blown trip up by, deep striking something right behind them or something, but it's enough. That's pretty much it for air. I hope that helped at all. Hope you've been enjoying this. Leave comments always if you want to. Again, this is only my opinion, so I'm not trying to state fact here. And the last one I'm going to talk about is water, which I have the most experience playing with because it's my play style in general. So until next time, take it easy.